Hey y'all, this is Brown at IF Brown, and today we are going to be talking about Monsters Unleashed. So, what do you get when you swap out the usual members of the Fantastic Four with characters who are oftentimes edgier or grittier, or just maybe a little more outlandish than you would expect for such a team? Well, you have a three-issue storyline which took place in issues 347, 348, and 349 of the Fantastic Four series. And as brief as this storyline was, it's oftentimes considered one of the best of the 90s comic book storylines to come out of the Fantastic Four series, and also just as a good story in general. And so, as I understand it, the creative team at the time, just, as a joke, decided to, replace the usual team with, four characters who, oftentimes had no business being in the Fantastic Four comic, maybe just as a guest star or something, but as a regular member of the team, not so much. But nonetheless, they decided to say, pick four characters who were selling like hotcakes in their own books and finding a reason to put them together as a team, namely a new Fantastic Four. And so the kicker was, as ridiculous as the idea was on paper, the creative team did such a good job with, weaving, the story with ongoing elements, and also giving each new member of the team a time to shine, to where, you actually got invested in what was going on in the story. And so that way, when the Fantastic Four inevitably, came back in the end, it was one of those things where, we as the audience are glad to see the Fantastic Four back, where they belong. But on the other hand, though, the idea of this new Fantastic Four having functioned as a loose-knit team is oftentimes a fun one. And in fact, it went on to spawn a couple of stories in the What If series, like what if that version of the Fantastic Four had stayed together? And some of those stories were actually pretty cool. But anyway, the story was written by Walter Simonson, who is a good artist in his own right, but he strictly did the writing for this particular story. And you have, hot artist Art Adams, or Arthur Adams, and you had Art Thibert doing a lot of the inking work with some assists from other inkers as well. But all in all, though, it's a very, energetic, very fun story. And so, what ends up starting off the story is this Skrull empress, or not empress, but this Skrull would-be princess named Delilah crash lands on Earth, and she's on the run from members of her own race who want to kill her. And so what she ends up, doing is she ends up using her shape-shifting abilities to sneak into the Fantastic Four headquarters and tricking each one of them into thinking that she's someone that they care about. Like for Johnny Storm, she disguised herself as a woman named Nebula, and I'm not 100% sure if that's the same Nebula that was Thanos' daughter, but she disguised herself as, Namor, who had kind of a thing going with Sue Richards. And then, for Ben Grimm, she disguised herself as Alicia Masters, who was formerly Ben Grimm's, girlfriend, but then ended up marrying Johnny Storm. So, yeah, that was a bit awkward. And for Mr. Fantastic, of course, she disguised herself as Sue Storm. And so for each one of these individuals, she ended up using this device on her hand to knock them out. And but for Reed Richards, because of his elastic elongating abilities that his body has, this measure was not as effective, and so it took her multiple tries to incapacitate him. And she also, there was another member of the team, a woman named Sharon Ventura, who I'm not too familiar with her character, but apparently she had somehow been turned into a thing-like creature, much akin to what Ben Grimm was originally. And Ben Grimm at this point in time had regained his human form somehow. And so, he is nonetheless in a relationship with her, and, he understands, where she's coming from in terms of, the pain and misery that, she's going through with her new body. And so, the two of them have a good relationship apparently. But so anyway, Delilah, though, she disguises herself as Ben Grimm and gives Sharon this highly drugged tea because, she realizes that, with Sharon's new Rocky-like exterior, she can't, use her, disabling device on her. So basically she drugs her and she falls unconscious. And so once all these, people in the Fantastic Four are put out of commission, including Alicia Masters, who was knocked out for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, Delilah takes a look at the Fantastic Four database, trying to find members for this makeshift team that she wants to put together, but for, say, a different mission. And what she's wanting to do is, she's actually wanting to put together a sort of makeshift kill crew, because the Skrulls that were going after her have basically, followed her to Earth. And so, they end up on this place called Monster Isle because, they were trying to track Delilah's, I guess you could say, biological signature on Earth. So basically, if they found any Skrull readings, they would know that that was her. But instead, they find a bunch of Skrull-like readings on Monster Isle. And so, rather curious, they set down there. And, they find out that there aren't any Skrulls there, but just, the way the monsters on this island are made up and biologically formed, they're very similar to Skrull-like, biology, according to the scanners. And so, what the Skrulls end up doing is they decide to utilize these monsters to hunt Delilah down. And so, they hit them with these darts, these things called slave darts, and, basically set the, I guess you could say, pain frequency to maximum. So that way these monsters, will, basically go out throughout different parts of the world, causing all sorts of destruction, in order to drive Delilah out. And so, like one of these monsters at some point has to hone in on her. And so, So Delilah, once she finds out all this, she forms this new team, looking through data on the Fantastic Four's computer systems, and she comes up with Wolverine, Grey Hulk in his Mr. Fix-It persona, and Spider-Man and Ghost Rider. And so she brings all four of them to the Fantastic Four headquarters, through, say, some form of mental manipulation, as well as, say, certain, communications. And she disguises herself as Sue Richards, and she, tells them a sob story of how some Skrull intruders came into the Fantastic Four headquarters and killed everyone there, but except for her and Franklin, because she was out, and Franklin is her and Reed Richards' son. But Sue, and according to her story, just happened to be out shopping when it happened. And so when she came back and she saw everyone dead, the only other person that was still alive was Reed Richards, who was in the process of dying. And so with his dying breath, he told her, who it was that came in and killed everyone. And so, she's telling them that it was the Skrulls who did it, and that, her husband had been able to get some of their energy signatures, and she can, give them a device, as in she can give, this new group, a device that can hone in on these energy signatures, and, that way they can, track, the killers down and avenge the Fantastic Four. And so, at first they're like, there's no way that, the Fantastic Four are dead. And so she takes them into this sort of makeshift morgue area. And sure enough, there's quite a few dead bodies there. And all of, the Fantastic Four are dead, with the exception of Sue Richards. And so, at this point, Spider-Man, Grey Hulk, Wolverine, and Ghost Rider, they all agree to go on this mission to bring the Skrulls to justice. And of course, some of the, edgier, characters in the group are all for killing them. and while, say, someone like Spider-Man is trying to say, okay, I understand her desire for vengeance, but we are not a one-man execution squad. But we're not an execution squad, that kind of thing. And so basically, the four of them, they are able to use one of the Fantastic Four's flying cars, which is kind of like one of those flying bikes from Spider-Man 2099, and they're able to track down one of these energy signatures. But when the energy signature leads to, say, a monster, they're like, wait a minute, what? And so after some chaos with that, the Fantastic Four, or this new Fantastic Four, they touch base with Sue, and she, as in Delilah, and so she tells them that these the Skrulls must have utilized the monsters to take over the Earth, and that's why you're picking up their energy signatures instead of Skrull energy signatures. But if you follow one of these monsters to its lair, you'll find the ones who are responsible for this crime, as in for wiping the Fantastic Four out. And so so this new group, they are able to find the monster that they were able to find. They're this monster's in the process of tearing apart this airplane, with a bunch of people on board. And so, the Hulk and Wolverine and Spider-Man, they all, give it their best shot of, trying to drive the monster away, with Spider-Man, webbing up the airplane to where, it'll, prevent the plane from coming apart, for a short period of time until they're able to get it safely to the ground. And so after that, though, the monster seems to break away from them because it seems to be called, to someplace else. And so that's when this new Fantastic Four, they take the hint and follow the monster to where it's going. And in this case, they end up in the Bermuda Triangle, and shortly thereafter, Monster Isle. And so during all this, on Monster Isle, one of the Fantastic Four's enemies, a guy by the name of the Mole Man, and he has this, race that he lives with, a race of underground monsters called subhumanoids, or moloids, as some people call them. And he has considered himself a protector of Monster Isle. And so when he realizes that, quote unquote, his monsters are being controlled by someone else, he decides to take a look at things and see what's going on. And when he finds out that it's, not any human enemy that's doing this, but an alien enemy, he just, he decides to put some plans together and take back control. And in the meantime, though, this new Fantastic Four, they, find their way to Monster Isle and, follow the monster underground. And in the process, they find the Mole Man and his army. And so, there's initially a bit of a scuffle, but then, Spider-Man, basically says, hey guys, let's stop for a minute. Let's figure out what's going on here. And he goes to parley with Mole Man, and he's telling them what's going on the surface, how, monsters from this island are attacking different parts of the world. And he's saying, hey, if you're the one responsible for this, then this needs to stop. And on the other hand, if you're not the one responsible for this, we need to talk and figure out what's going on. And so, Mole Man, basically, he's in the position where he's like, okay, his army, outnumbers the Fantastic Four, or this new group of Fantastic Four, but at the same time, considering that, these aren't the usual Fantastic Four, and, some of the members in the group are a lot more willing to go for blood than the original team, Mole Man's kind of like, okay, all right, follow me, don't stray into the tunnels. And so basically they have a truce. And in the meantime, though, Sue Richards, aka Delilah, wakes up Reed Richards because it turns out that he has access to information and technology that she can't decipher, what with her being the Skrull and what have you. And so once she apprises him of the situation, telling him that his family is basically being held hostage and that she will kill them if he doesn't help her, he reluctantly agrees to help her out. And this whole time she's in her form as Sue Richards, and basically she's also has a low level telepathic ability as well, and which is one of the reasons why she was able to, along with, say, disguising herself, it was also why she was easily able to get the drop on the members of the Fantastic Four before knocking them out. And so she works with Reed Richards to find the location of this egg-like device that the Skrulls had left behind in their first contact with the Fantastic Four. And it turns out this device contains a creature, this sort of biomechanical creature that the way that they're designed, they are they're giant, almost humanoid shaped, but they're designed to be unwaveringly loyal to the Skrull Emperor or Empress, whichever one happens to be on the throne of the Skrull homeworld. But Delilah and her faction, the ones that were wanting to overthrow the Skrull Empire, or at the very least they're wanting to overthrow the Skrull Empress. She and her faction had been able to secure one of these, titans, as it were, and steal them away from the Skrull homeworld. And in the process, they were able to, get it to planet Earth, but they were never able to come back for it, until now. And so it turns out that this was, located around, one of the Fantastic Four's first battles with the Skrulls when they first came to Earth. And so, there's, some sort of, he said, she said going on where, Reed Richards is trying to figure out, okay, does this mean that the Skrulls, when they first came here, were trying to find that creature, or was it just a coincidence? And so, Delilah's like, it doesn't matter. It's, the fact is, we know where it is now, and it's sure enough on Monster Isle. And so, Delilah, still disguised as Sue, gets Reed Richards to take the two of them to Monster Isle. And, they get there, right when, the Fantastic Four, or the new Fantastic Four, and, the Mole Man and his army, make contact with the Skrull kill team. And so, at this point, a whole bunch of chaos happens, and there's an all-out fight that breaks out, and it's it's total chaos, really. But what ends up happening is this Skrull Titan, when they eventually do find it, basically, Delilah forces them, to, she forces the Fantastic Four, to break it out of its, containment system. And, they, use their capabilities to do so. And, once it's unleashed, they're thinking, oh crap, we're dead, because there's also a self-destruct mechanism on the device itself, not on the Titan, but on the device. But they're able to negate, the self-destruct system, thankfully. But the monster, though, the Titan, and before Delilah can get a hold of it, it makes visual contact with one of the monsters. Because, see, it turns out that, one of the monsters had been sitting on, on the device that it was hatched from, thinking that it was her egg. And so this whole time she was like, I'm the mama, you're the baby, that kind of thing. And so once it hatched and, looked up at her, it imprinted on her, because that was the way they were programmed. Because originally, the Skrull Empress was the first one that they would see, once they, came out of their containment systems. But in this case, whereas Delilah was wanting herself to be the first one that it saw, then that moment was taken away from her, and in fact it imprinted on the monster that had been basically taking care of it all this time. We're talking for like years. And so then the mother monster's husband gets back, and so they talk in their own language, and basically she's pointing at the Skrulls, the moloids, and the Fantastic Four. And so it's like, yeah, mom and dad are pissed, and this Skrull Titan considers itself one of the monsters now. And it's at this point that the original Fantastic Four comes back onto the scene, because Franklin, back at the Fantastic Four headquarters, was able to find the Fantastic Four and get them out of the bindings they were in, because obviously their deaths were faked, and Delilah had shunted them into the storage facility where they're basically tied together, to where if any of them tried to escape, their throats would be constricted. Like one person tried to escape, everyone's throats gets constricted. And so it was actually with the help of the Fantastic Four's cybernetic secretary, or I should say robotic secretary, because when Reed and Delilah, disguised as Sue, had exited the building, Reed had slipped her a coded message. He had said something to the effect of, tell my friends in the Marines that everything's okay. And that turned out to somehow be a code for everything is not okay, do the opposite of what I'm saying right now. And so when she kind of put two and two together, she got little Franklin to help out and find the Fantastic Four, and sure enough he was able to do so, and they were able to guide him through the process of getting the devices off. And so little Franklin, he helped save the day. And so because of that, the rest of them were able to make tracks to Monster Isle and basically be the cavalry for this makeshift team of the Fantastic Four. And so at this point, Delilah's plans are ruined, and the Skrull kill crew are defeated and forced into retreat. And then on the other hand, you have Delilah, who finally gets her comeuppance, in the sense that Ghost Rider, of all people, gives her her comeuppance in the form of his penance stare. And so even though, like, say, Wolverine and Grey Hulk were wanting to do something a lot more brutal to her, considering her manipulation of them, the fact that she didn't get away without some form of punishment leaves them satisfied. And so she is taken away with the Skrull kill crew, and to face justice with the Skrull Empire. And whereas in the meantime, the Mole Man and his people, the Moloids, the Mole Man is really pissed off that he wasn't able to get that Titan that everyone was searching for. But on the other hand, though, the Fantastic Four talk him out of an all-out battle, which they were already about to engage in, because they're pointing out that, yes, you guys outnumber us, but you have two teams of Fantastic Four coming at you now. Are you sure you want to go down like this? And so Mole Man's like, okay, depart in peace. And so at that point, as everyone's saying their goodbyes and everything, the Punisher of all people flies to the island, and it turns out that he had actually been one of the people, along with, say, like the Avengers and what have you, who were trying to take out the monsters that were coming from Monster Island. Because the reason that this new Fantastic Four had only gone after one monster was because Sue Storm, aka Delilah, had pointed out that the rest of the world's super teams, like, say, the Avengers and their divisions, would be able to take out the monsters that were coming from Monster Island, but she needed the Fantastic Four specifically to take out the Skrulls, and so that's why they only went after one monster. So anyway, though, Punisher of all people, he was able to follow one of the monsters back to Monster Isle, and he's in this helicopter that has a bunch of weaponry on it, and he's about to unleash it all. But then he sees the Fantastic Four on the island, and he sees some other familiar faces, like Spider-Man and what have you, and he sees that the mood is much more relaxed and light, and he's like, okay, I guess I'm not needed here. Well, what's next on the list? And so he just flies away. And so yeah, the story literally ends on a random Punisher cameo. But all in all, though, this was a really fun story. It flowed at a fast pace, and it was very entertaining, and I thought that it did a good job of showing what would happen if different characters replace the team altogether. And so you have a bunch of characters who, while some of them had been on a team before, like say Spider-Man or Wolverine, I mean, they were all much more comfortable as, say, loners, and that dynamic is made very apparent when they're interacting with one another, and they are able to pull together as a team, but oftentimes it's a very reluctant interaction. And on the other hand, though, I like how each of these characters, they are given their moments to shine. And whether it be, say, Ghost Rider using his his chain and hellfire to tunnel through this collapsed area to get them out of a trap, or whether it be Grey Hulk basically pulling a Samson act and holding a whole column up, or whether it be Wolverine and Spider-Man teaming up to unlock the device that would open the egg, and also being able to deactivate the self-destruct system. I mean, you got some really good moments where they put their skills to use. And also for Ghost Rider, you have the first time where his character is able to summon hellfire, just like at will, and it's something that catches him off guard. But he does it in a moment in which, say, all the characters are being hypnotized or, telepathically manipulated by Delilah. And because of Ghost Rider's, supernatural nature, the telepathic effects are muted on him. And so he's able to basically summon this huge column of fire, which basically, snaps everyone out of it. It's like, a flash grenade almost. And everyone's like, what happened, But that's the first time that Ghost Rider was able to do that, because up to this point, I mean, he was only depicted with a certain level of ability, whereas this is the first time that had happened. And if I remember correctly, he is able to do it a few more times in his own series. But let's see. And also, I liked seeing the dynamic between Wolverine and Grey Hulk, because the two of them, they're kind of frenemies, because for one thing, the two of them had gotten mixed up in, a one-on-one fight back in an issue of the Hulk that had been illustrated by Todd McFarlane. And Wolverine had actually, shish kebabbed Grey Hulk. And so, having, read that storyline, it was interesting to see the interaction between the two of them, because it's more like, Grey Hulk's like, he's not happy to see Wolverine, and Wolverine's not exactly happy to see him, but at the same time, he's like, hey, you didn't call me, I didn't call you, but both of us were called here. Let's just figure out what's going on first, before we get into it, that kind of thing. And Spider-Man, I liked how he was probably the one quote-unquote straight man in the group, in the sense of, he's probably the most level-headed member of the group at this point in time. And, he's the one who tries to diffuse hostile situations and what have you. But on the other hand, though, Wolverine had some good leadership moments as well, such as him pointing out that, when they were on their, sky car and, the plane was going down, Spider-Man was originally, going to, fly the plane while, Wolverine went to help Grey Hulk and Ghost Rider. But then, Wolverine's like, no, I'm driving, you're flying. and because he was pointing out that, I mean, and then Ghost Rider chimes in as well, but basically Wolverine's logic was, Spider-Man's, one of the only people here who has the capability of trying to keep the plane physically together, that kind of thing. And so you do have these little moments where each member of the team, it's like they shine in their own ways in terms of how they use their abilities, but also they shine in the sense that they're all in character with one another. And so that was really cool to see. And also, the artwork by Arthur Adams was just amazing. And there's almost an anime-like quality when it comes to, say, how he does people's eyes. But at the same time, there's an almost Todd McFarlane-like style when it comes to, say, how the bodies are drawn as well. And so, all in all, while there's certainly influences, from, say, McFarlane and others, I mean, he has his own style, and something to where it's like, you're looking at an Art Adams picture. And one of the things that was really cool about, getting to see him illustrate the story is the fact that, with all these elements going on, all these elements in the book, you have, two teams of the Fantastic Four. You have Skrulls, and you have all these sci-fi elements as well, like the Skrull Titan, what have you. But the monsters on Monster Isle, you could tell that Art Adams was having a field day when he was setting his pencil to page and drawing these things, because it's like the monsters, they're so fascinating to look at, they're so detailed. And it kind of made me think of, say, the thought and imagination that went into, say, creating something like Pokemon, the creatures of that. It's like, you could just tell that the artist was having a good time with this, and they're used so well. And it's like the equivalent of, like old school serials where giant dinosaurs were popping up and, that kind of thing. And it was just fun to see. But the thing is, the writing, though, is also something that went into making the story as good as it was, because with all this craziness going on, there was, a solid plot thread that connected everything. And so, it's a story that it was fun to read, but in its own way, it made, sense, if that makes any sense. And I guess you could say that, the one thing that I could say is a quote-unquote weakness to the story is the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a reader of the Fantastic Four series, or let me phrase that. I wasn't reading the Fantastic Four series at this point in time. Like, I'd read a few issues here and there, but I didn't have like an overall comprehension of, what was going on in the series at this point in time. And so they refer to certain events that have happened a few issues before, or certain developments, like, say, Johnny Storm marrying Alicia and what have you. Because last I remembered, Alicia was Ben Grimm's girl, so I was like, wait, what? And also, the character who was, I forgot her name, but she was like the Fantastic Four's robotic secretary. I was like, when did this happen? I mean, it was cool to see, but at the same time, I'm like, who? I mean, where did she come from? And also the character of Sharon Ventura, the one who had been transformed into the Thing. Like, I'd seen pictures of her before, but I never really knew her story. And so seeing her in the story without really knowing how she got there, that was kind of confusing. And also seeing Ben Grimm in his human form, like, on one hand, I was happy to see him as human again, because, I mean, I like his character, and it's nice to see that he's enjoying his humanity, but at the same time, I'm like, wait a minute, when did he become human again? That kind of thing. And it kind of made me think of, back when I was, reading that, trade paperback of Marvel 2-in-1. I don't know if I mentioned it in the review, but there were a few stories where Ben Grimm would be, human again, as opposed to, say, his, usual rocky self. And then he would don this, robotic suit that Reed had made for him that, was shaped like the Thing. And so basically, he was, able to, have the Thing's abilities without actually being the Thing. And so I'm like, when did this happen? Because they didn't really go into detail on that. And so it's a similar type of thing here as well, in the sense that, Ben Grimm's human again, but because I didn't read certain issues of the Fantastic Four that were going on at the time, I don't know how that happened. So, Sharon Ventura being on the team and having been transformed into a thing like creature, and Ben Grimm being his human self again, I was kind of confused as to how, all that happened. And so yeah, I guess if there was another thing I could say is that it would have been interesting to see like reactions of, say, other Marvel characters, to the news that the Fantastic Four had quote unquote died. Maybe if they'd had another issue to play with or something, to where it's like, how when Superman died back over in DC Comics, when Doomsday had killed him, or I should say he and Doomsday had killed each other, you had that storyline called, I think it was Funeral for a Friend or A World Without a Superman, one of the two. And it was like in the Superman series, like in all the Superman books, like there was this storyline that was like, it was called like World Without a Superman or Funeral for a Friend, where you saw how a lot of characters and supporting cast members were affected by Superman's passing before Superman's return. And so it would have been interesting to see a story or two, or maybe an issue or two, covering that, that kind of thing, because the Fantastic Four were very much well known and beloved throughout the Marvel Universe. And so the news that they died, would have made for a massive, shockwave throughout, the superhero community, as well as the world in general, I think, within the Marvel Universe. But to be fair, though, because of the rapid escalation of events and the amount of time that passes, you get the idea that this is a very fast-paced story, which, it is a fast-paced story, but not a whole lot of time passes. This is only like a day or so, maybe two. And so as far as, this new Fantastic Four is concerned, they're like, and also as far as Delilah is concerned, these four are the only ones who know that the Fantastic Four are quote unquote dead. And so, while there is lip service being paid to, say, other super teams, being called into action to, take out, to, fight the monsters that were being manipulated by the Skrulls, and the fact that, this new Fantastic Four is able to trust these superhero teams to have that situation in hand while they, track down the Skrull killers. That actually made some sense. But at the same time, I just think it would have been interesting had they, had there been more of, say, a leaking of the story, so to speak, that the Fantastic Four were dead, and, you saw everyone's reactions, that kind of thing. Like maybe if, either Wolverine or Spider-Man had, called so-and-so to let them know that, the Fantastic Four are dead, blah, 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 or something like that. And then, that person tells someone, and that person tells someone. Next thing you know, it's like, newsflash, blah, 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 that kind of thing. That would have been interesting to see. But, like, I understand why that didn't happen, considering how short amount of a time that the story took place within. But, just speaking as, someone who's read a lot of comics, in knowing how popular the Fantastic Four were, both as, say, a comic book as well as within the Marvel Universe in general, it just would have been, it felt like a missed opportunity in that regard. Their deaths being say talked about and everyone reacting to it. But I'm trying to think what else was there. Yeah, like, I think overall, the creative team did a good job of weaving all these different elements together, because you also, with the character Delilah, I'm not sure if she had been in any other Fantastic Four stories prior to this, or just any other stories in general, but her character was rather fascinating because, on one hand, yes, she's, trying to overthrow the, Empress of the Skrull Empire, and she's, willing to resort to, unconventional means to do so. But also, while she is manipulating Reed Richards, she does, start to, become attracted to him, that kind of thing, which kind of leads to this rather cool moment on Reed Richards' part, wherein, basically he acts like he's attracted to her, which to some extent he is, but at the same time, he also knows that this isn't Sue. And so it comes to the moment where he reveals that, while he was doing what she said because of, the whole, holding his family hostage bit, her mental manipulation was not as effective on him. And so when he reveals that to her, it's like, Reed, you son of a gun. It's like he didn't want to put his family in danger, but he wanted to make sure until, he had, the odds stacked in his favor before, springing that on her. And so basically, when the rest of the Fantastic Four comes in to help the new Fantastic Four, and Reed as well, that's when he's like, checkmate, lady, that kind of thing. So it's like, well done, Reed. So I liked how, even though the majority of the focus was, say, on this new Fantastic Four, that, one of the main characters of the usual Fantastic Four, basically, played a huge part in saving the day, that kind of thing. So, let's see, what else was there? But yeah, just as far as Delilah goes, I mean, I thought that she was an interesting villain, and I did like the comedic twist of, say, when they brought in the Skrull mythology, as in they referred to, the Fantastic Four's first battle with the Skrulls, and then, so you have a lot of lore to tap into, but I like the idea of this, sort of, infant Skrull Titan, this robotic Titan that they had, in the comedic, bit where it ends up imprinting on, the monster who was basically taking care of it, in its egg state, all those years, and so that was a nice twist, I thought. But, basically, I think, a lot of this also depends on, how much, one enjoys, say, comic books from the 90s, because there's a lot of stuff going on in this particular story, but at the same time, the creative team does such a good job of weaving things together, while also making this, ridiculous on paper scenario actually work out rather well. And so I'm going to go ahead and give, Monsters Unleashed 5 out of 5 stars. It was a great story. As brief as it was, I think it's, definitely one of the best of the 90s Fantastic Four series. Or excuse me, one of the best of the 90s Fantastic Four stories I've come across. And also, that little bit at the very end with the Punisher, I mean, that was just a nice little, extra bit added to the joke of having, out-of-place characters within the Fantastic Four book, that kind of thing. And they even make fun of it on the cover of that issue, which it happens. But I'll go ahead and show y'all real quick. So here's 347. So you got Spider-Man, you got Wolverine, you got Ghost Rider, Grey Hulk, Mole Man, and the Skrulls. And of course, the quote-unquote dead Fantastic Four. Then you got 348. The new Fantastic Four swinging into action. And last but not least, 349. And there's a little bit with the Punisher right there. It's like featuring the world's most gratuitous cameo. And they're right. I don't know about the world's most gratuitous cameo, but it is a gratuitous cameo, but it definitely works in the comedic, factor of the book. So you got the new Fantastic Four and the original Fantastic Four all together, along with Mole Man. Their backs against the wall, facing the odds. Pretty cool cover. But yeah, so all in all, this was a great story. And, as short as it was, it's nice to know that, the possibility of, or I should say the possibilities of them having stayed on as a team together were explored in issues of What If. In fact, I'll just go ahead and show you those real quick. And I'll be reviewing these as well. Here you go. And this is issue, 78 of What If. And for the record, the artwork on the cover is not the same as what's in the book. I actually think that the artwork in the book was much better. But so you got Grey Hulk, Wolverine, Spider-Man, and Ghost Rider. But Ghost Rider in the book does not look like this. So, and then you have this one. And this is actually a tribute issue to the late artist Mike Wieringo. And sadly, he passed away at the young age of 44, and he had due to sudden heart failure. But basically, he did I believe it was like 7 pages for this story before he died. And so, the writer of the story and other people, they got a bunch of artists together to, basically maybe do a page or 2 each until the story was complete. And so, this was like a nice little send-off to artist Mike Wieringo. So you had, Ghost Rider, Wolverine, Grey Hulk, and Spider-Man. So I'll definitely be reviewing this one as well. So yeah, that was Monsters Unleashed. It was a really fun story. If you like, especially if you like, 90s comic books, this is one of the, most fun, and probably one of the most entertaining storylines that you could find within, say, the 90s, especially with the Fantastic Four as well. So I was glad to see the regular Fantastic Four basically come back at the end, which you kind of knew they were going to come back, but still, it's their book. But at the same time, it was cool to see these 4 different characters in a position where they had to work together and sort of live up to the name of Fantastic Four, however brief that was. So yeah, that was it. Thank you very much for taking the time to check out my review. You got any questions, comments, please drop a line, let me know. And if you like what you see here, please feel free to like and subscribe. So y'all take care. Bye.